All right, it's my favorite day of the week. It's Wednesday. I'm back. Hi, Ron.
Hi, April.
I am so excited that I get to bring Ron Thurston back onto the show today. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
It's just friends hanging out. That's it. That's it.
Totally
It's you
is.
and me just chatting it up today.
It totally is. So, but I do have to get a set up for anybody that may find this in the feed that doesn't know who me and you are and hasn't been a part of this show before. So my name's April Sabral. I'm an author of the book called The Positive Effect and the founder of Retail U. And every week I bring on my amazing retail network to have an awesome conversation and celebrate really retail as an industry and the positive effect of leadership in it. And so if you find this in your feed, what I'm going to say to you is share it with your retail network. We want to get this conversation out to as many people as we can. And also, if you're joining us for the first time, put your name in the chat, share where you're from, any insights, any inspiration that you got. We'd love to go back and read them afterwards. And then also, you know, if you're coming back, thank you for joining us every week and coming back to The Positive Effect. So yeah, I just said, you know what? It's time to have Ron back on for part 2.
So I love it. A lot has happened. When was it? 6 months ago?
Oh my God. Like we are on episode 29 now. And I think
it's more than 6 months.
Yeah, I think you were on episode 3 or 4. So
I think it was last year, actually.
I think it was.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. So it's incredible. So, you know, you've got so much great stuff going on and there's been such an awesome, you know, like response to what you're doing. So I just thought it was really time to bring you on and like get you back in this conversation about retail leadership and, you know, what you're up to. So
thank you. So, and there's so much happening in our industry. They're on every angle, every part of political, social, health things going on. It's all impacting our industry.
Yeah,
so
100%.
We need to be very loud about what we're working on and how we motivate all of those millions of people who work in the field.
Yeah, 100%. Can't agree with you more. I've seen that as well. So, you know, I'm going to, you know, I always have a list of questions when I jump onto this show, but I know this conversation can go anywhere. But like, I've been, you know, looking at what you're doing. I love your book. I have it with me. I recommend it to people all the time. And I love now that on Amazon, we come up as recommended together. It's so cool. So, you know, but I've also seen, you know, you've left Intermix, right? So now you're on your own and you're speaking to lots of people. So you've got this Take Pride Today that just showed up on the bottom of your website that's like trademarked. So can you talk to us about that and how that came about and why?
Yeah, I would love to, because there's very intentional there are very intentional words here. So my whole premise around retail pride is this concept of the idea that we are very much commonly in an accidental career in retail, and that because it's often accidental, we don't give ourselves credit for the fact that we do really hard work and that we make really important decisions. We hire thousands of people. We impact the economy in ways that are unparalleled. You know, that 1 in 4 people in this country work in retail. It employs somewhere between 30 and 40 million people directly work in retail. And so you think about the size, and it's huge just in the US. You know, the size and scale of our industry is enormous. Yet I spent most of my career saying, oh, you know, what do you do? Oh, I just work in retail. And I never gave myself credit for that work. And so this idea of retail pride is about showing up and saying, yes, this may have been accidental, but now I'm going to choose to be intentional about this being my career. And when you become intentional about what you're doing, that you have a strategy, you have a thought process, that you own your own experience, then you actually start to make better choices. Well, you know, if this is what I'm going to do, this is what I love, then I'm going to choose to work for brands that support my vision and can train and develop me through Retail U or the brands, you know, that you work for. I'm going to work for a great leader. I'm going to love the products that I sell. I'm going to surround myself with people because you're intentional about what you're doing. And I think that has been a missing conversation often, based on all the feedback I've received, in less than a year since the book came out, similar to you, of like, wow, no one ever said this before. No one ever said, what you're doing is great. And outside of the circle of all of us, like retail insiders.
Right, us retail insiders, that's what it is. Like,
it's retail. It's like, oh my God, you work in retail too? Like, you'd be at a party and like, oh my gosh, let's talk about retail. And, but the world needs to hear us in a much bigger way.
Right.
And say, our impact is so enormous. And we're seeing it today in this idea, and this is a long answer to your question, but we're seeing it today in the idea of people choosing to not go back to work.
Yeah.
Or saying, I'm going to be more specific about the brand I want to work for based on how that brand operates, the culture, their stance on diversity, inclusion, sustainability, whatever you're most passionate about. You choose to work for brands that stand for those things.
100%.
And so here we are. And so what I wanted to do is start a platform, an organization intentionally called Take Pride Today. And the idea of take is, the action around, I'm going to choose to take pride in one thing today, one action, one thought, one behavior, one idea. I'm going to take pride today in how I show up. I'm going to take pride today I'm going to have that difficult conversation that I have been putting off. I'm going to take pride in the fact that I, impacted someone in a really positive way through a conversation or a customer experience, or did that extra work. I mean, the list every day you could say, well, what am I going to take pride in today? And it may be different tomorrow. It may be however you have the opportunity to show up, you do that really well that in that moment at that time. Because I think if you give yourself these big goals and say, I'm going to change my behavior every day and do this, it can sometimes feel unattainable.
Yeah, 100% overwhelming. And also we've got so much going on every day that how do we achieve that? I love this idea because I think I really identify with it, because for my whole career, I was like, oh, I'm just working in retail. Like, it's not, and it still feels like that sometimes, right? Like when you talk to people, it's like, oh yeah, I'm just working in retail. But it's like, no, it's like, it is an amazing, we do work really hard. People that work in retail work really, really hard. And me and you come from the store operations side of the business, but all areas of the business work really, really hard. But I do think that those people in the stores work exceptionally hard. And if you think about what happened in COVID last year with the whole kind of essential workers tagline, right? Like one of my posts that was the biggest blog share last year with the most comments and most engagement was that picture of the Target team with the t-shirts that said, we are essential. And that speaks to what you're saying of like having pride in what we're doing. And we could not have got by last year if the retail people in the stores hadn't been working in the stores to service us of what our needs were in times of when everything else was closed down, Agreed.
And so now here we are a year later, and everyone seems to be hiring. Everyone's looking for those like great, overused term unicorn. You're looking for these people. And now it's like, well, how did you show up last year as a brand?
Right.
Did you actually support all those frontline workers? What were your benefit programs? How did you support the community as a retail business during shutdown when brick and mortar retail was essential in some cases?
Yeah.
And what did you do? Because now you want me back.
Yeah.
And now I have a choice.
Right.
And so then you can be more critical about the brand you're choosing to work for. And for me, that is about taking the opportunity to then be proud and say, I love working in retail, but I want to work for a brand that also does the right thing.
Right.
I want to work for a leader that is also proud of who they work for and how they show up, and the conversations that I have for it. So that, I had to come to terms with that word pride, myself, because now I use it all the time of like, it's a controversial word, a little bit. And I had to think, that was not the original title of my book. And but the more I dug into this and the more I thought about it, and really, like, this is about pride. This is about how we live our lives, and different parts of it. You know, as a gay man, I have my own relationship with the word pride.
Right.
And that's, I had to think about, well, am I a proud gay man? Am I proudly married? I'm a proud retail executive. Like, what part of my life am I most proud of? And what am I not? And then, you know, to put a cover out that's big and bold as an art piece and say retail pride, like, and be loud about it. Was all, you know, it was an evolution of the journey, you know, just like, you know, I'm sure it was for you. But now I'm really happy that I did it.
Yeah, it is. I never even thought about that. It is a bold word and something like that, because actually, when I actually think about it, I've done a lot of leadership courses, self-development courses. I read tons of people's things. And if somebody was to say, I've done lots of workshops, but nobody's ever said to me, like, write down a list of what you're really proud of, you know, like that I haven't really been asked that question before.
and I actually did use that question a lot as I started to, and most commonly in retail, we say, I'm really proud of my team.
Right.
That is the most common answer when I ask that question.
Okay.
And I began to push back and say, okay, and I fully appreciate that. And every team I have led in the last 30 years, I'm very proud of them for the way they showed up. What are you proud of about yourself? Like, what are you most proud of that you specifically did? What behavior, what idea, what contribution are you personally most proud of? And it changes the conversation, because again, I think it's a retail phenomenon. We inherently deflect back to our team. We take zero credit for what we do.
We do. That is such a true statement. It's funny, because as so many leaders I've had on this show, and I always say to them, and I have to say, like, can you be specific about something you've done? Because it is a retail phenomenon that everybody just talks about everybody else but themselves.
Yeah, and we're really
in service people, though, right?
We are in service to others.
Yeah.
We are. And that's why we end up in this industry, because we love to serve others, customers, our teams, our companies. We are in service, and so that means that you're often then complimenting everyone else. You are building this idea that this is not about you as a leader, and that is 100% true. Because if you've worked for leaders where it's only about them, that is also can be very demotivating to a
100%,
team.
yeah.
So I think, it was never about me. It was about the team, and I'm always very proud. But I think we also have to recognize our own hard work.
Yeah, we also have to recognize our own work. I think that's a really good point. And I think that, when you're a leader in retail and you're doing, whether you're doing your performance review at the end of the year, or you want to get promoted and you want to do more, you really do have to share what you're doing. Do you know how many people I talked to in the last year that I just coached them to go into interviews to tell their story about what they're actually proud of or what they've accomplished? And it was them as a leader that actually got them there. Yes, their team, but if it wasn't for them as a leader, the team wouldn't have actually executed and wanted to work for that leader. Because I say that all the time. It always comes back to leadership, right? Great people follow great people. But it's that story of, like, share your, that some leaders are really exceptional at what they do, but they're not good at interviewing and then can't get a job because they don't know how to tell what they've done because they can't share from their own perspective.
Yep. Yeah. And it's a difficult thing to admit that you, it's the balance between kind of an ego, pride and ego, this idea, and being in service. I actually think you can be both. But it does require you to, like, receive a lot of feedback, ask a lot of questions, be really curious. Like, hey, based on that store visit I just did, give me some feedback.
Right.
Because, we've all been part of, like, the big store visit and the big idea of, Ron's coming, you and I have both been in that position.
Yeah.
And, but but I always appreciated the feedback of like, this is how you made the team feel.
Right.
That yes, it is Ron's coming, but this is how you made them feel. This is what you left them with. This is what they will remember. And that for me was always a really important component of just leadership.
So if you were, going to like go back to when you walked into stores, you did store visits, maybe not in the last year, but I know you were in stores in the last year because you're a store person like me. But if you were going to coach a leader today, right, like in today's reality with this idea of take pride today in working in retail, and you were going to give them some tips, or if they were going to go and do some store visits or hold some meetings, there's a lot of big national meetings restarting, management training, district managers getting together, that population. Like, what questions could people ask, or what advice would you give or coach them so that we could get them to instill this?
I think it's first recognizing it in yourself first, of thinking about what you are most proud of, on that particular day. But then, I like to kind of go on this idea of everyone on the team plays a really important role. And so you have to then not focus only exclusively on leaders.
Right.
That you kind of start, the kind of groundswell of success in retail starts in every role. Right. And I won't even say the bottom, because any of us that have run stores know the back of house teams are the most important to the success of any retail business.
Yeah.
And like so I don't categorize it as kind of a hierarchy. I'm saying we need everyone in back of house. We need everyone in front of house. And we're all here equally to serve the customer. We serve each other and we serve the customer. And that idea of kind of inclusion, how we show up, who we hire, it's fresh in my mind because Job Pixel, who is a video-based hiring platform, just wrote a blog post today around kind of stop hiring for this idea of fitting in on the team, and like, because we have done that for a long time, and we do that in retail. Will they fit in on the team?
Yeah. And
today in 2021, we have to be able to say, actually, they won't fit in. They're going to bring an entirely different perspective. They're going to bring a customer experience that doesn't exist in our store today. And that I love.
I love that.
Like, I don't want them to fit in. I want them to bring something new. I want them to evolve the culture. And to answer your question, I think we have to all dig really deep into everyone that's working front lines and find out what's motivating them or demotivating them. And then we have to fix it. We have to solve this. We have to solve the financial challenges, of being underpaid, undercompensated, under celebrated, all of it. That we are critical to the turnaround in the brick and mortar space.
So what I'm hearing from you, I'm going to recap what you said because it was really golden. So number one, making sure that if you're a leader and you're approaching a team or you're approaching your business, that you're looking at the store as there's no hierarchy involved. Yes, sure, everybody has a title and they have a responsibility and they get compensated for that responsibility. But at the end of the day, everybody's role is just as important. Thinking about the back of house, the front of house, because that is how you create pride in what everybody does. And it's so important because if the back of house isn't functioning right, your stock's not on the floor, your customer isn't going to see it. It's not going to help those associates, right? So I love that idea of thinking about how everybody in that team can have pride in what they're doing and that kind of remove that hierarchy kind of feel, right? Second of all, I'm hearing that you're saying, think about hiring differently, right? Like think about hiring to be a proud team of diversity and inclusion, which I think is really key. I was on a podcast last week on Clubhouse and somebody asked me a question about something that was said a long time ago on one of these lives by a leader that was like, hire because you have a connection with them or you have chemistry, and it goes against, and she actually called it out. She was like, I listened to that and I got it, but it goes against everything that should be happening in the marketplace today, because like, what if I don't have a connection with somebody? Does that mean I'm never going to get promoted? And that used to happen, right? So that has to change, right? Like
it has to change. It has to change. It even referenced in this article, and again, it's fresh today, of like employee referrals are great, but you fall into the same trap of hiring your friends who are probably more similar to you than not. And so like stop putting employee referrals as the most important part. Like go find someone who actually doesn't have all the skills you were looking for. Like bring them on and see what happens. And great leaders, I believe, can take someone that just shows a spark of something and turn it into a burning fire. Yeah. But that's our job to do that.
100%. And like that's why I'm so passionate about leaders being really great leaders, because when you work on yourself being better every day, then you can see that in others and you can create that, because you create that space and that spark for others. I mean, when I worked at Apple and I did a recruitment job for about 10 months, I was like a guest recruiter. And I remember going to Cupertino and having training, and they said to me, the worst thing that anybody can ever say in a hiring seminar is they're not an Apple fit. Don't ever say that. And if you hear anybody say that, correct them, because there is no Apple fit. What we look for is agility, like learning agility, because there's lots of things that happen here in a tech company that are first-time experiences. You have to learn on the go and be able to not repeat the same thing if it's a mistake, like learn fast. And I thought that was really key, because that's where they've got it. They kind of got it right, because you go into a store and it's very diverse, They
still do a really beautiful job with that today.
They do. They absolutely do. I just saw a post on LinkedIn the other day. It said, come work for us and then bring your whole self and do something great. I'm probably going to get messed up, but it was a really good marketing that they had done about inclusivity and making sure that we're thinking about that. And I'm a big advocate for that in the accept pillar of, ACT, because it's a huge piece. And I think that we as leaders have to, I think sometimes I had experiences in my career where people felt like they weren't connected to me. And that taught me to, if it's somebody I'm not naturally having a connection with, to like make the effort even more to get to know them. And sometimes look around me and say, this team is agreeing with me too much. I don't think it's because they necessarily I don't think it's because they agree with me. I think it's probably because they're just the same as me. It could be like they just have the same thinking. So if people are agreeing with you all the time and you're a leader, kind of question yourself on that, because you may be hiring people that are just too like-minded to you and you're not getting that difference of thought, right?
Right. But it takes a lot of courage for someone to challenge those of us that sit in leadership roles.
Yeah.
And so it's actually hiring people not only that are different, but are courageous and can say, you know what, when I'm not doing this well, or we as a company, don't be afraid to say something. And I have actually found that to be not as common as I would have wanted. Don't find out about it in the exit interview. Don't wait until someone's out the door and said, like, this place is insane. I can't work here.
But we've had the ability to do that in our career with our teams. And I always say as well, I'm not naive to that. If you hold a title, your title will go before you, because people need a job. Somebody I was talking to the other day, they were like, nobody shows up to work and says, I want to make the company profitable. Everybody shows up to work and says, I need a paycheck and I want to take my family on vacation, right? Like their personal needs, right? Yeah. So, and that's their desire. So if that's their goal and what they want to achieve, they're going to do everything at all costs to do that. So as a leader, you need to be very aware, pay a lot of attention to something you could be missing, so that you don't find that out in the exit interview. So how do we do that as leaders, Ron? Because we've held titles. How do we help other leaders make sure as they grow into these roles that they create those environments where people can feel that they can share?
Yeah, I think it's it's being very intentional about creating a safe place to do that. And it only happens in a way if you are consistent about it, and you have, if it's Zoom, if it's in person, that anyone that's worked for me that might be on the call or anything, I call them Ron's roundtables, no managers invited. Like, I want everyone else except the leaders to come and sit and let's have an honest conversation. But if you're going to do that, then be prepared to act. Right. Because what doesn't happen, and Apple also does this well, and like employee net promoter surveys, is that you then have the opportunity to fix it, because they're going to send them another survey. If you didn't fix it, it's your responsibility as a leader. And I fully believe that. As a former Apple leader, I also lived by those same guidelines. Right. Of like, don't sit in a room of 10 10 non-leaders, and they tell you everything that they love and don't love about working for the company, and then shake everybody's hand and give everybody a hug and leave and come back 6 months later, and all of those people had quit.
Right.
It actually means that I didn't do my job.
Yeah.
That I didn't take your feedback and I didn't act on it, and I didn't remove obstacles for this to be a better place for you to work. I'm accountable for that.
And the thing is, like, people are always like asking me questions, and you probably get this asked as well, is like, you know, I'm working on culture. I want to make culture better. You know, diversity and inclusion is a big thing, you know, making sure that people feel safe and have pride, but culture. And I'm like, but culture takes action by the leaders to do something different. You know, I wrote in the book, a leader shared with me a couple of years ago, actually, I was working with a HR leader, and she said to me a very, very true statement. She said, you know, people that think they're not working on culture have a culture. It just may not be the culture that they want because they're not intentional about it. And I was like, oh my God, that hit me in the head. I was like, wow. So there is a culture everywhere, by the way. So if you're watching this, you do have a culture, but is it the culture that you want? And as leaders, you need to ask yourself that question today, and then actually put things in place to create the one you want, not just talk about it because you do have one, but is it the one that you want to attract that talent to your company?
100% agree with that. I also think we also sometimes put too much pressure at the company level to create culture. And I think those of us that grew up just like you in working in stores, you know, the culture of when I was a store manager may have been slightly different than the district, the region, the company.
Right.
Like this is my kind of bubble of what I want to create. I want to create the culture, the ability to win in my little bubble. And if that then builds into influencing the district, the region, the company, then that's great. But I've always approached it of like, don't give the power back to someone else to create culture for you.
Oh,
we own this ability to do it ourselves.
Right.
And everyone you hire should be able to influence culture. And you know, we use that word very loosely, but we shouldn't let others influence that. If you don't like it, say something. If you love it, say something. But let's keep doing more of that. And I have found, you know, that when you do that as a leader, you're more than likely the business of your store, your district, your region is going to be better than that of your peers. Yeah. Because you've intentionally built something of a great place to work that no one else can recreate. It's you.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because in the book as well, in The Positive Effect, I talk about when you're a leader and you've built really good relationships, because I used to see this, and you've kind of shared too much as a leader. And how do you pull that back, especially in a store experience, because you're working with a lot of people and people socialize and go out and things like that. And we want people to be open and share. But yeah, because there's these times where you're like, I've shared too much. How do I pull that back and get back that culture that I want to be, you know, a safe environment, but not overstepping that mark? A lot of people struggle with that because we work in a relationship driven business, right? So I do talk a lot about that, of like how you can, like, if you're that person, you're looking at this and thinking, oh, well, you know, maybe I've shared too much, maybe I was building it too much, and I haven't got those structures in place now to pull it back to do the other things, like hold people accountable and all that kind of stuff. Like, how do you do that? Because that can be tough. I'm just looking at time. I'm like, oh man, it's 9:20. It's like 25 minutes.
I'm not at all surprised to hear that.
I do want to talk about, though, the program that we just launched, that we had you and some other retail leaders in. I'm going to take this opportunity to plug it because, you know, it's an amazing program, and just kind of get your take on how this can help, you know, specifically employment in retail, because we know we've been talking about that. It's a huge problem right now. But we just launched a program where we are working with a nonprofit. So they're a nonprofit. They already had a program running. They were doing youth leadership programs for over a decade, and One Voice, One Team in Canada. And it's a kind of youth leadership program that they run. And then we saw what they were doing, and we were like, okay, how can we build a Retail U program that's like get your first job in retail and ace it, and then have retailers actually sponsor their program, their nonprofit program, as well as, you know, buy one of ours as a kind of together as a partnership, and then, you know, give them an internship at the end of it. And Ardennes, which I'm amazed. I'm so happy that they jumped on board and actually ran the first program and have sponsored these kids going through it. And I saw the kids last night logging into Retail U and the platform going to take our course. I was like, oh, this makes me so happy, right?
And how old are most of them?
They're high school, but we're thinking of going into college as well, because these kids that are going through this program as well, they had never really thought of retail as a career. They thought of it as a part-time job, maybe, or maybe they didn't even think of it as a part-time job, a lot of them, because a lot of them were just they come from underprivileged areas and things like that, and they didn't really see it as something that they could participate in, right? So the fact now that these kids have an opportunity to have an internship with Ardennes is amazing. And I think this could be a way for retailers to really find their future workforce and their future leaders. And that's why we're thinking about going into colleges. But we need nonprofit organizations in the States, US, youth organizations and retailers to jump on board and kind of sponsor these kids going through these programs. You did a mastermind class with us, so did 3 other leaders. Are you excited about this? Because it just came out in Retail Insider today, and I was like,
I'm so excited about this because for many reasons. And there are brands in the US, because I'm referencing Old Navy. So Old Navy also has a program like this called This Way Onward that starts as internships and becomes, you graduate into a permanent role. And I'm saying it because I had the opportunity last week to speak to all of them, at their Old Navy. I was the kind of closing, motivational Ron speech, or their closing keynote for their graduation ceremony for a couple hundred of these kids. And it gives me such joy because this is an industry that requires us to continue to fill the pipeline. Stores open, stores close, businesses grow, people turn. You need a constant pipeline. Yeah. And if we create cultures and businesses and leadership that is about bringing people along, always supporting kind of the next teams, the next generations, the next group of people, then their likelihood to stay in our industry and become whatever they dream of being, whatever role that they want, is phenomenal. But it always starts very early on, because their experiences then influence their choices for next. And did you love working in retail? Were you treated well? Did the store manager of that store treat you with such care and kind of what's the making you a priority, right? Versus kind of you become this temporary distraction, right, to my business. And I think if it's the reason I love it is because it actually requires us all to be better leaders. Yeah. And it forces you to then not just work with people, like you said earlier, who are like you and have worked with you for a long time and everyone's happy and we're all high-fiving in the morning. That's fun. But if you bring in unique talents and people like this from these programs, it forces you to lead differently. Yeah. And I think back to my journey into retail at the beginning, where I had people that made me feel valued. I moved out of home really, really young, wasn't getting along with my stepdad, first job in a retail store. My first manager made me feel like I had a voice, made me feel valued, was compassionate, listened to me, built my confidence. Because one thing I love about One Voice, One Team have been doing is they help youth find their voice and build confidence. Because confidence, when you build confidence, we all know this, you achieve something and then you see the possibilities of what you can do more in your life, right? And that comes from that confidence, and that's what they're doing. And I think we have the opportunity, but I love that what you said, it forces us to be better leaders. And, bringing youth into your store as a first part-time employee, how is that experience going to look? Their expectations are different than they were in the past. There's just so much opportunity here. I'm just so excited. So much opportunity, and in such a positive way. Yeah. Because the idea of influence in retail, and no matter what direction you want to go, no matter what you want to sell, those skills. So I'm sure I have sat down with people who have had one part-time retail job. Yep. I'm like, tell me your background. And they're like, I sort of did this on the side. I'm like, let's talk about it. Yeah. You learned cash management because you learned how to ring. You learned how to do visual merchandising. You learned how to work on a team.
Yeah.
You learned how to serve others in customer service. You learned back of house organization, loss prevention.
Yeah.
You learned, probably some great product knowledge. Maybe you learned styling.
Yeah.
So in this course of 6 months, here are all the things that you probably, did you do this? Yes. Did you ring? Yes.
Yeah.
Did you close at night?
Or I got like assigned new people to onboard, so I was training them. That's like
You're training.
Skill,
When, I could spend 5 minutes with someone and go through a list of like, did you do this? Did you do this? So use that. They're like, yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. Like you worked in a multi-million-dollar business.
Yeah.
And you learned how to do merchandising.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I don't care that you've had one part-time job. Look at all the things that you did.
Yeah.
And it's so empowering when someone hears that.
Yeah.
Because all of their friends are like, why do you work at the mall? It's exactly what happened to me. Why do you work at the mall?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, like it kind of sucks. And here we all are now.
Yeah, exactly.
For me, it's like getting that message back of like, stop doing that to yourself.
Yeah.
Like be proud of the fact that, I learned how to use a register today. Okay, great. That's my take pride today is I learned how to ring on the register.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
I love it.
Great. I used to love working on the register. Like
I feel like there's
something else.
I feel like there's a workbook coming out of like documented, like a journal, taking pride journal or something from you eventually down the road. That would be cool. Yeah. Anyway, you know what, Ron? It's always a pleasure having you on the show. And just, I'm so happy that we're friends now and we're on this mission together to shape and change the industry in a positive way. And I'm excited about where your journey is going to take you. You're speaking. How can people get in touch with you if they want to get you on to speak and inspire their teams?
Yeah, thank you. So retailpride.com is the best place because then you can find my book. You can find podcasts and speaking and blogs. You can text me from my website at retailpride.com. And let's talk. I love to, speak to retail teams that are probably. I've had a lot of leaders buy my book for their teams. Right. And then do kind of a book club and, spend an hour with me. Those are such a joy. Right. Because it's like and it has nothing to do with your company. My book is very kind of democratic. It's about loving retail. I don't care what you sell. Yeah. I've spoken to the Dallas Cowboy retail teams. I spoke to Old Navy. I've spoken in luxury brands. We all do the same work. Yeah. We all have the same challenges. We do. And, sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes like people are like, oh, I work for this brand. I'm better than you. You work for that brand. It's like, no, we all do the same thing. We do the same thing. We help customers. Yeah. And I think it's amazing what you're doing. So thank you. Just so happy to be part of your I think it's amazing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yes, doing it together.
Right. So you heard it. Ron Thurston, back on the positive effects. Take pride today in everything you do. Challenge your teams. If you're a store manager and you're in a store today with your team, ask them, what are they proud of? If you're a DM or a regional, an executive, whoever you are in retail, think about that. Think about what you're proud of and really build confidence in your teams and in a positive way. And I'm always about valuing people, like make people feel valued. And, just really excited to share this message. So share this if you find it in your feed. I'm going to keep saying that over and over again. You can follow us as now we're on Apple Podcast as well as Spotify. So it'll just put the Positive Effect April Sabral. So that wraps up another fun episode of the Positive Effect.
Thank you for the invitation.
You're welcome. You're welcome. All right. So see you next week, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.